Beneath tranquil waves and sunlit seas, deadly encounters lie in wait without warning. From isolated reefs to familiar shores, divers, swimmers, and rescuers face primal forces that turn peaceful waters into battlegrounds. These gripping stories reveal the raw power of nature, and the human spirit's fight to survive when the ocean's predators strike with relentless force. The sea off Gansbaai, South Africa, was restless that morning, swells rolling in harder than expected, the gray sky pressing low over the turquoise water as a Russian news crew prepared to film a special segment on the rising great white population near Shark Alley. The broadcast was supposed to be routine, with pre-planned commentary from the deck of a mid-sized boat anchored near a known shark hotspot. But the ocean had other plans. The team had been on site since dawn, setting up equipment on the deck and along the boat's edge, with 3 of the 6 crew members wearing wetsuits in case they needed underwater footage or had to assist divers. The live segment began smoothly, with the anchor standing near the railing, describing the ecological importance of great whites in the region. Just a few meters away, the ocean churned softly, dark and seemingly calm beneath the surface. Camera 2 was positioned just above the waterline to get a dramatic angle of the anchor with the sea behind it, while another camera operator moved along the side, tightening a lens and adjusting focus. Without warning, a rogue swell struck the side of the vessel. It wasn't massive, but it was strong enough to cause the boat to shift with a violent jolt, tilting suddenly to port and throwing several people off balance. The camera operator closest to the edge slipped first, landing hard on his side and skidding toward the railing. A production assistant grabbed at him, but the sudden shift caused both to lose footing. At nearly the same moment, one of the divers who had been kneeling near the rear tumbled backward, hitting the deck before rolling clean off the boat. Within seconds, 3 crew members were in the water, all yelling at once, their limbs flailing in panic. The live camera, still rolling, captured the screams and splashes before the control room abruptly cut the feed. Beneath them, movement stirred. The crew hadn't realized how close they were to a cruising great white until it surfaced in response to the commotion, its huge, pale body rising from the deep like a ghost through glass. Nearly 5 meters long and weighing well over a ton, the shark closed the distance in seconds. Its torpedo-shaped form moved with chilling precision, drawn by the vibrations of struggling prey above. Blood hadn't yet entered the water, but the chaotic motion had been enough to trigger an instinct it couldn't ignore. The first to see it was the production assistant, who caught a glimpse of its dorsal fin slicing through the waves as it veered toward the diver. The others tried to swim toward the boat, but the sudden coldness of fear, mixed with the drag of their soaked clothing, slowed their frantic strokes. The diver turned too late. The great white lunged upward with terrifying force, its jaws open wide, rows of serrated teeth flashing as it surged through the surface and bit down on the diver's right leg. The impact sent a spray of water and blood into the air. The bite wasn't a full amputation, but it ripped through the wetsuit and flesh with horrifying ease, leaving exposed muscle and gaping wounds. The diver's scream was muffled by the crashing waves, but the agony in his voice still pierced the morning air. He flailed instinctively, which only caused more blood to pump from the shredded limb, clouding the water in a widening red spiral. The shark circled again, not in a frenzied attack, but with measured curiosity, as if deciding whether to strike again. The 2 other crew members made it to the boat's stern, where 2 others leaned over with life rings and poles. One crewman managed to hook the production assistant and haul him up quickly, but the injured diver struggled to stay afloat. By now, the shark had passed beneath the injured man again, its massive shadow brushing just beneath the surface like a submarine. For a moment, it seemed like the attack would continue. The dorsal fin broke the water again as the shark turned, angling for another approach. But something changed. Perhaps the people shouting from above or the boat's motor starting up as the captain tried to shift position. The shark slowed, circling once more before diving down and vanishing into the murky green below. The remaining man in the water, covered in blood and barely conscious, was finally pulled aboard by 2 crew members using a rope tied around his chest. His leg was mangled, the wetsuit torn to ribbons, and flesh hanging in strips. The crew moved fast. Towels were pressed against the wounds. Belts and cords were used as makeshift tourniquets, and the anchor, still pale and stunned, helped hold the diver steady as the team radioed for medical evacuation. The boat sped back toward the harbor at full throttle, bouncing over the waves while blood stained the deck and soaked into the towels clutched against the diver's thigh. None of the crew died that day, but the impact went far beyond physical wounds. The diver survived emergency surgery and would eventually walk again, though with permanent nerve damage and deep psychological scars. The others returned to work weeks later, but none could forget the raw violence they had witnessed, the size of the predator, the suddenness of the attack, and the helplessness of floating in water that could turn deadly in seconds. In the aftermath, producers faced heavy criticism for putting crew members at risk without sufficient safety protocols in place. Investigations focused on why the team had been so close to known shark waters without full cages or protective measures. Experts emphasized that great whites are not mindless killers, but are still large, instinct-driven predators, especially dangerous when startled or triggered by erratic movement. What made the incident so haunting wasn't just the bite or the blood. It was how fast everything happened, how quickly a moment meant for storytelling turned into a brush with death. For the crew, it was a reminder that nature doesn't care about cameras or broadcasts or schedules. The sea, the sharks, and the instincts beneath the surface follow their own rules, and sometimes they break through with terrifying force. Rain had fallen for days across the Louisiana coast, and the rivers had long since spilled into streets, neighborhoods, and bayous, turning entire towns into floating mazes of rooftops, treetops, and broken fences. Helicopters circled low over submerged communities, their blades churning the heavy, humid air as rescue crews worked non-stop to locate stranded families and deliver them to safety. On the fourth day of operations, a United States Coast Guard MH-60 Jayhawk hovered near a collapsed two-story home surrounded by muddy, debris-choked water. 4 people, a man, a woman, and 2 young children, clung to what was left of a rooftop, waving frantically as the chopper closed in. Inside, Petty Officer Kyle Mason, a rescue swimmer with 10 years of experience, readied himself for a standard vertical insertion. He wore a ballistic flotation vest, a harness rigged to the hoist, and a rescue strap for lifting victims. He had done this dozens of times before through hurricanes, downpours, and gale-force winds. But this water was different. Thick with sediment, oil, and decay, with visibility reduced to almost nothing. What they didn't know, and what no one could have expected, was that dozens of livestock carcasses had been washed into the surrounding bayous after levees failed. Their bloated bodies drifted downstream, attracting predators far inland, including several large bull sharks. Kyle dropped from the helicopter, hitting the warm water with a practiced splash before adjusting his gear and signaling the hoist operator. He began swimming toward the rooftop, careful to avoid floating furniture and jagged boards sticking out of the water like spears. The family looked terrified but alive, soaked and shivering. Kyle moved with steady, deliberate strokes, calling out over the rotor noise and motioning for the man to prepare for lift. He didn't see the shark coming, not through the brown, debris-filled water that clouded everything below the surface. The bull shark had already been in the area for hours, drawn by blood and decay. It was large, over 7 feet, and aggressive, with powerful jaws and an instinct for ambush. When it struck, it came from Kyle's blind side, just beneath the waterline, lunging with force that felt like being hit by a cinder block. Its teeth found the side of his torso, clamping down across his ribs and lower chest in a bone-crunching bite that sent a shock of pain through his entire body. The ballistic vest slowed the impact, keeping the shark from tearing through completely. But it didn't stop the teeth from punching through the side fabric and sinking deep into his skin and muscle. Kyle thrashed once, hard, more out of reflex than strategy, and the shark released, twisting away with a streak of blood trailing behind. He went under for a second, vision flashing black from the impact, lungs burning before breaking the surface again, gasping as he fought to stay upright. Blood was already clouding the water around him, and his ribs felt broken, like his chest had caved in on one side. But through the pain and the panic, his training kicked in. He had people to save, and the chopper couldn't hold position forever. He shouted for the hoist and waved the sling toward the man on the rooftop, keeping his voice steady despite the blood seeping from beneath his vest. One by one, he got the family into the strop. First the children, then the mother, then the father, keeping himself between them and the open water. He scanned the surface constantly, expecting to see that gray torpedo shape circling back, but it never did. Maybe the shark had gone after something else. Maybe it had just been a warning bite. He couldn't afford to think about it. By the time the final lift was complete, Kyle's strength was fading. The wound beneath his vest throbbed with every heartbeat, and warm blood kept slipping through his fingers every time he pressed against his side. He reached for the cable, fumbling with the harness as the crew lowered the extraction basket. His vision blurred and the chopper's shape seemed to tilt as he tried to focus on the spinning blades above. When he finally collapsed into the basket, he barely felt the lift. Everything hurt, and his thoughts were starting to drift. But he knew the family was safe. That was all that mattered. On board, the flight medic tore open his vest and exposed the wounds. Deep punctures along the ribs, one broken with torn muscle and blood pooling fast. The medic applied pressure and injected a coagulant wrapping gauze around Kyle's torso, while radioing ahead to the emergency trauma team waiting back at base. The pilot pushed the throttle hard, flying low and fast through the rain, while the crew sat in silence, watching their teammate fight to stay conscious. Doctors later said that if the shark had bitten even an inch higher, the teeth would have severed arteries near the heart. Kyle had come within minutes of dying but survived thanks to fast care, his vest, and what they called unshakable resolve under extreme pressure. He spent weeks in recovery, undergoing surgery for the rib and muscle damage, then physical therapy to restore function to his side. He had permanent scarring and chronic pain, but he never once regretted the jump. The Coast Guard launched a full review of the operation. While they had dealt with alligator threats in flooded regions before, the idea of bull sharks moving that far inland during floods hadn't been considered in operational planning. New protocols were introduced within months, requiring sonar sweeps for submerged threats in brackish waters, and more protective gear for swimmers entering flood zones with known animal activity. Some missions were adjusted to rely more on hoist rescues from rooftops only, minimizing time in the water. Kyle Mason returned to active duty less than a year later, though he carried the memory of that bite every time he zipped up his vest. He knew how close it had been, how 1 second of surprise, one bad angle could have ended his life. But he also remembered the 4 people clinging to that rooftop, and the fact that they were alive because he didn't stop swimming. For him, that was worth every scar the water left behind. The morning sun rose slowly over Nosy Boraha, casting golden light across the lagoon where generations of local fishermen had gathered octopus, spearfished reef fish, and taught their children to swim. The water was calm that day, smooth like glass, with no hint of danger lurking beneath. For 4 teenage boys from the nearby village, friends who had grown up together exploring the reefs and tidal pools, it was the perfect morning to go spearfishing, just as their fathers and uncles had done at their age. They walked down the sand with wooden spears and small hand nets, laughing, bare feet wet from the tide, unaware that something had changed beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to them, illegal waste dumping from a nearby commercial trawler, done quietly over several nights and never reported, had caused something far more dangerous to settle into the bay. The rotting fish remains and meat waste had drifted along the currents and pooled in deeper channels, drawing in predators that rarely entered the lagoon, among them at least one large tiger shark. By midday, the boys were deep into the lagoon, swimming and diving for octopus near the reef shelf. They had already caught 2, their net half full, and were laughing about who would take the biggest share home when the mood shifted. The first scream tore through the stillness so suddenly and so loudly that it startled the seabirds from the trees lining the shore. One of the boys, the smallest, had been closest to the drop-off where the reef gave way to deeper water. He had just surfaced from a dive when a massive gray shape rose from below and slammed into him with terrifying speed. There was a splash, a violent thrashing, and then silence. He never reappeared. The others froze for a moment, unsure what they had seen. Just a blur, a shadow, maybe a wave. But then the water turned red and panic took over. One boy turned and began swimming hard for shore, his limbs moving in desperate, frantic strokes. But the tiger shark was already circling, triggered by the chaos and the scent of blood in the water. It came from behind, hitting the fleeing boy across the back with its snout before biting into his side and dragging him under in a spiraling plume of foam and red. The third boy, blood already streaming from a bite to his upper thigh, kicked weakly toward a jagged coral outcrop that jutted just above the surface. He had felt the shark brush against his leg once before it struck again, latching onto his thigh and shaking violently. Somehow the shark let go. Maybe his struggling knocked the shark off balance, or maybe it was distracted by the screams coming from the others. Either way, he pulled himself onto the sharp rocks, screaming for help, his blood washing down the coral into the sea. From the village, several fishermen heard the cries and ran to the shoreline. Within minutes, 2 small wooden boats pushed off, their outboard motors sputtering as they raced toward the spot where the attack had happened. The bleeding boy was still clinging to the rock, pale and shaking, his hands slick with blood and coral cuts. The water around him was clouded red and bits of broken spear floated nearby. One of the fishermen jumped in and lifted him into the boat while the others searched for signs of the other boys. They found one of the bodies quickly, drifting not far from where the shark had first struck. His back had been torn open, his body limp, and his arms still stretched forward as if he had been swimming when it happened. The second was found deeper in the lagoon, near the reef ledge where the currents were stronger. He was missing one leg, and the other was marked with jagged bite wounds, likely sustained while the shark was thrashing him back and forth. The fourth boy, the first to be taken, was never found. Back on shore, word of the attack spread fast. Mothers collapsed onto the sand, screaming their sons' names as villagers tried to comfort them. The wounded boy was rushed to the nearest clinic where doctors worked to stop the bleeding and stabilize him. He survived, but the damage to his leg was severe. Muscle torn, nerves exposed, and infection already setting in from the dirty water and bite. He would never fish again. The village, still in shock, gathered that night along the shore for a candlelit vigil. Families stood in silence, holding each other as the sea lapped gently at the beach, now forever marked by what had happened. Elders led prayers, and fishermen spoke of the old warnings, how tiger sharks were not to be taken lightly, and how changes in the sea's balance could bring predators where they didn't belong. The lagoon, once sacred and safe, had turned hostile, and the people knew something had caused it. Within days, rumors began to surface about a commercial fishing boat spotted dumping barrels offshore late at night, and although no officials confirmed it, many believed the blood and rot had drawn the sharks closer than ever before. Locals demanded action, barriers, patrols, and protection for traditional fishing areas where their children played and their food was gathered. Signs were posted, and spearfishing was halted until further notice, but the damage had already been done. The lagoon, once a place of laughter and learning, now carried the memory of screams and blood, of a predator's shadow slicing silently through familiar waters. The survivors would never forget the terror of that day, and the village would never again see the reef as only a place of life and harvest. It had become something else, a reminder that even the most sacred waters could change, and that when balance is broken, the sea has a way of punishing those who forget its power. The sun was just beginning to warm the waters of False Bay on a clear June morning, as Peter Van Rooyen prepared for what was meant to be one last long training swim before the charity crossing scheduled for later that month. At 46 years old, Peter was a seasoned open-water swimmer who had spent countless hours in South Africa's oceans, braving cold currents, jellyfish, and rough waves to prepare for races and fundraisers that raised money for local causes. It was his favorite spot to train alone, a place where the bay's calm waters and mild visibility made for ideal conditions to work on endurance and technique. On this particular morning, the sea was almost glassy, with only a slight ripple from the gentle breeze and faint underwater currents flowing toward the shore. Peter entered the water at first light, stretching his arms and legs and then pushing off from the sandy beach with a smooth, practiced stroke. His goal was a 3.5-kilometer swim around the point and back, a route that had become routine but still challenging enough to keep his focus sharp. With his wetsuit hugging his frame and a bright orange swim cap marking his position, Peter set a steady pace, his breath slow and rhythmic as his body sliced through the cool water. Nearby, a friend and kayak escort named Johan followed at a cautious distance, keeping an eye on the swimmer and the horizon for any signs of trouble. The waters were known for seals, occasional dolphins, and of course, the great white sharks that inhabited the bay. Local authorities had recently increased patrols and installed shark spotters along the coastline to warn swimmers and surfers, but Peter trusted his own experience and the kayak escort to keep him safe. About 40 minutes into his swim, Peter was roughly 250 meters from shore, midway through his last lap. The morning light glinted off the surface as he turned his head to breathe, eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. Suddenly, without warning, a massive shadow moved swiftly from behind, cutting through the water like a torpedo. Peter felt a violent, searing pain as something slammed into his left shoulder and upper back with overwhelming force. The great white shark had struck, its powerful jaws clamping down on muscle and wetsuit. tearing through fabric and flesh in a snap that echoed beneath the surface. Peter's body instinctively jerked forward as the shark released, retreating into the depths as quickly as it had appeared. The sharp, crushing bite had missed major arteries, but left deep lacerations and torn muscle that sent waves of burning pain radiating through his left side. Blood began to seep into the water, mixing with the sea's cold current and drawing Johann's immediate attention. From his kayak, Johann saw the sudden splash and turbulent swirl, then heard Peter's sharp cries. Without hesitation, he paddled hard toward the swimmer, calling out over the water and pulling him onto the kayak as Peter's strength faltered. Despite the heavy bleeding from the bite wounds, Peter remained conscious, his breathing rapid but controlled as Johann applied pressure to slow the blood flow. The kayak bobbed gently in the bay's mild swell, carrying them quickly back toward the shore where emergency crews had been alerted by the escort's radio call. Paramedics arrived within 15 minutes, carefully transferring Peter onto a stretcher and rushing him to a trauma center, a short drive away. In the emergency room, surgeons worked rapidly to assess and repair the damage. The bite had ripped a jagged gash across Peter's shoulder blade and upper back, muscles shredded and skin hanging loose. Over 60 stitches were required to close the wounds, and a skin graft was performed to replace tissue that was too badly damaged to heal naturally. The doctors confirmed that, although the injuries were severe, Peter was incredibly fortunate that no major arteries or nerves had been severed, a difference between life and death measured in millimeters. News of the attack spread quickly through the local swimming and surfing communities, sending shockwaves of concern and sympathy. The area was famous for its marine life, including a robust population of seals that attracted great white sharks, but attacks on swimmers were rare. Authorities reiterated the importance of shark spotters, early warning systems, and safe swimming protocols to minimize risk, while local groups called for increased monitoring of seal colonies and public education on how to behave in shark country. Peter, once stabilized and recovered, spoke publicly about the incident. He expressed gratitude for the quick response of his kayak escort and emergency crews, crediting their skill and calm for saving his life. Despite the trauma, he stated clearly that he would not return to open water training, having made the difficult decision to prioritize his family and health over the sport he loved. However, he remained a vocal supporter of ongoing shark awareness programs and encouraged swimmers and athletes to respect the ocean's power, while taking all possible precautions. The incident left a permanent mark on Peter's life, physically through the scars that traced his back and shoulder, and emotionally in the cautious way he now approached the sea. Friends and fellow swimmers visited regularly, helping him adapt to limitations during his recovery and reminding him of his strength and resilience. Though he would never again race through the cold, blue waters of False Bay, Peter's story became a reminder to the community that even the calmest morning could turn dangerous in an instant, that the ocean held both beauty and risk, and that respect for nature's predators was not optional but essential. Months later, when the charity swim went ahead with safety protocols heightened and additional escorts in place, Peter watched from the shore, proud of the community's resolve but certain his last lap had been final. The shark that had struck him remained a silent presence beneath the waves, an ancient predator whose role in the bay's ecosystem was undeniable, even if it came at a human cost. Every morning for the past 2 years, Geert Adrichim had risen before dawn, eager to slip into the cool waters near Gansbaai, South Africa, and swim the same 4-kilometer route that would soon test him like never before. A lifelong swimmer with a quiet passion for the ocean, Geert had trained relentlessly for his first charity swim, a crossing designed to raise funds for marine conservation and local schools. He knew these waters well. They were his backyard, a place of endless beauty where seals frolicked on the rocks and the sun glittered off rolling waves. Yet, like many who had come before, Geert also understood the bay's darker side, the presence of great white sharks, silent hunters that patrolled beneath the surface, unseen but always near. On the morning of June 15, 2013, the sea was calm and the sky cloudless, the air crisp with the freshness of winter turning to spring. Geert's family, his wife and 2 young children, stood on the shore, bundled in warm jackets and hats, watching as he prepared for his final training lap before the charity event scheduled for the following weekend. They had seen him swim this route dozens of times, admired his steady strokes and unshakable determination. Their quiet confidence made the sudden tragedy that followed all the more shocking. At approximately 7:10 a.m., about 300 meters from shore, the water rippled slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if disturbed by a swift movement beneath the surface. Geert was midway through his lap, steady and focused, unaware of the shadow moving fast below him. Then, without warning, the great white shark struck, rising from the depths with a force so powerful that it lifted Geert clear out of the water before dragging him down in a violent swirl of foam and blood. The roar of terror that escaped his throat was cut short, swallowed by the sea's vast silence. Nearby, a support kayaker named Thabo had been following Geert's progress closely, paddling steadily in the calm water. When he heard the scream and saw the sudden eruption of red spreading rapidly across the surface, his heart stopped. Thabo paddled faster than he ever had, reaching the spot where Geert had vanished only moments before. The water was churned, thick with blood and bubbles, but no sign of the swimmer's body. Thabo's voice cracked as he radioed for immediate rescue, desperation creeping into his tone. Rescue teams arrived within minutes, combing the bay with boats and divers searching for any trace of Geert. What they found were torn pieces of his wetsuit snagged on underwater rocks, and the global positioning system tracker he had worn on his wrist, now floating just beneath the surface. His body, however, was nowhere to be found. As hours passed and the search turned into a recovery effort, officials believed the great white had mistaken Geert for a seal, attacking with fatal intent. Despite extensive efforts, no remains were recovered, leaving the tragedy shrouded in uncertainty and pain. Back on shore, Geert's wife collapsed into the arms of friends and family as emergency crews arrived with news. Her children clung tightly to her legs, confused and frightened by the chaos unfolding before their eyes. The community gathered quickly, sharing grief and shock at the sudden loss of a man who had seemed invincible in his love for the ocean. The open-water swimming community was especially stunned, having followed Geert's training and admired his dedication and skill. His death was a cruel reminder of the bay's wild nature, where beauty and danger existed side by side, inseparable and ever-present. A memorial swim was organized a week later, drawing swimmers, family, and friends to the bay to honor Geert's memory. Divers formed a circle over the spot where he had vanished, their bubbles rising in quiet tribute beneath the waves. Small boats dotted the water, while on shore, candles and flowers marked a makeshift shrine. Though the ocean had taken him, Geert's spirit lived on in the hearts of those who loved him and in the waters he had known so well. In the days that followed, discussions around safety and shark activity intensified. Officials reiterated that great white sharks were a natural part of the bay's ecosystem, playing a crucial role in maintaining the marine balance, even as they posed risks to humans who ventured too close. Many called for increased patrols, improved warning systems, and stronger community education about how to safely share the ocean with these apex predators. Still, for many who knew the bay intimately, there was an unspoken understanding. Its wild beauty always carried quiet, unquestionable danger. Geert's family, devastated yet proud, spoke openly about their loss, urging swimmers and ocean lovers to respect the sea and its creatures. They emphasized the importance of preparation, vigilance, and support during open-water swims, hoping no one else would endure what they had. The charity event went ahead with heightened safety measures, including more escorts and real-time shark monitoring. But the shadow of Geert's disappearance lingered in every stroke and every wave. False Bay, with its sparkling waters and rugged coastline, remained a place of challenge and wonder, a reminder that nature in all its majesty demanded both awe and caution. Geert Adrichem's last lap had ended not in triumph but in tragedy, marking a somber chapter in the story of the bay and the people who dared to swim within it. Lucas Newman was a 29-year-old diver from Germany who had spent years chasing underwater adventures across the globe. He had recently joined a live-aboard trip in the Red Sea, near the famed Elphinstone Reef, a site known for its vibrant coral formations, diverse marine life, and the occasional appearance of large pelagic predators. The group planned a series of drift dives, drifting with the currents over deep walls, enjoying the warm water and clear visibility. For Lucas, this trip was a chance to explore one of the world's premier dive destinations, while sharing the experience with fellow enthusiasts from several countries. On the third day of the trip, after a successful morning dive, the crew prepared for a routine drift dive off the reef. Lucas entered the water last, following the dive master's signal, and began the slow, controlled drift along the coral wall. The currents were stronger than expected, pushing the divers steadily southward and making it difficult to maintain group cohesion. Despite careful planning, Lucas found himself separated from the others as he followed a school of fusiliers into a small overhang. When he surfaced near the prearranged pickup zone, he realized that the boat was nowhere in sight. Floating on his back, Lucas inflated his surface marker buoy to signal his position and began scanning the horizon for the live aboard's bright yellow hull. Minutes passed as the currents continued to tug him away from the reef and the main group. Alone on the vast blue surface, Lucas felt the first twinge of unease. The surface marker buoy bobbed beside him, a small orange beacon in the endless water. Time stretched and he checked his dive watch. Nearly 40 minutes had passed and still the boat had not returned. Unbeknownst to Lucas, an oceanic white-tip shark had been drawn toward the unusual scene. The Red Sea was home to a variety of sharks, but the oceanic white-tip was notorious for its boldness and curiosity. Known for its broad, rounded fins and white tips, this species was often found in open waters and had been involved in several documented encounters with divers and shipwreck survivors. The shark circled silently beneath the surface, its steady presence unnoticed at first by Lucas. At first, the shark seemed merely curious, making several slow, cautious passes around Lucas and the floating surface marker buoy. Lucas stayed perfectly still, aware that sudden movements might provoke aggression. His mind raced with thoughts of safety and survival, instincts sharpening with every passing moment. The oceanic white-tip, growing bolder, moved closer, its dark eyes fixed on the lone diver. Lucas noticed the distinctive white tips cutting through the water, and his heart pounded harder. Suddenly, the shark lunged, striking Lucas's left forearm with a powerful bite. The force jolted Lucas violently, pain erupting as the shark's teeth punctured deep into his wetsuit and flesh. The shark pulled briefly, twisting its head as it tried to seize the limb, before releasing and retreating. Blood seeped from the wound, mixing with the water, creating a crimson halo around Lucas's arm. Despite the pain and shock, Lucas fought the instinct to thrash and instead focused on keeping calm. He managed to lift his injured arm above the water, preventing further bleeding into the sea while simultaneously inflating his buoyancy vest, making himself more visible to the crew still searching for him. His breaths came fast but steady, eyes darting to the distant horizon for any sign of rescue. The shark circled once more, assessing its potential prey, before finally turning away and disappearing into the blue depths. Lucas's mind remained locked on survival, every muscle tense but controlled. 10 minutes later, the dive boat's crew spotted the bright orange surface marker buoy bobbing against the waves and rapidly maneuvered toward Lucas's position. They hauled him aboard quickly, noting the deep puncture wounds on his forearm and the pale shock on his face. A tourniquet was applied immediately to stem the bleeding, while one crew member called ahead to a hospital to prepare for emergency treatment. Lucas's fingers trembled as he clutched the bleeding arm, grateful but exhausted. At the hospital, surgeons examined the bite wounds closely, noting the sharp punctures and torn skin that would require thorough cleaning to prevent infection. The doctors explained that oceanic white-tip bites were rare, but could be severe due to the shark's powerful jaws and sharp teeth. They suggested that the shark's curiosity might have been triggered by Lucas's flailing, the bright colors of his dive gear, or the surface marker buoy, all unusual sights in the shark's territory. After meticulous cleaning and stitching of the wounds, Lucas was given antibiotics and a tetanus shot, then monitored for signs of infection or complications. In the weeks following the attack, Lucas underwent physical therapy to regain full movement and strength in his arm. The scars from the bite were a constant reminder of the event, but he was determined to make a full recovery. Psychologically, however, Lucas faced new challenges: anxiety and lingering panic attacks whenever he returned to the water alone or faced strong currents. His confidence as a diver had been shaken, replaced by a cautious respect for the ocean's unpredictability and the creatures that called it home. Despite the trauma, Lucas refused to abandon his passion. He spoke openly about his experience to other divers, emphasizing the importance of safety protocols such as staying close to the group, deploying surface markers promptly, and avoiding sudden movements if approached by wildlife. He also advocated for continued research into shark behavior to improve diver safety and reduce misunderstandings that could lead to attacks. His story served as a cautionary tale, but also as a testament to survival and resilience. The oceanic white-tip shark, meanwhile, continued to patrol the open waters of the Red Sea, an apex predator perfectly adapted to its environment. Though feared by many, the shark played a crucial role in maintaining the balance of marine ecosystems, and most encounters with humans ended without incident. Lucas's attack was a rare and unfortunate event, highlighting the delicate dance between humans and nature beneath the waves, a dance that required respect, knowledge, and sometimes a bit of luck. Months after the incident, Lucas returned to diving with a new perspective. He chose shallower, more sheltered sites with friends and guides he trusted, rebuilding his confidence stroke by stroke. The Red Sea remained one of his favorite destinations, not just for its stunning beauty, but for the lessons it had taught him about vulnerability, courage, and the enduring power of the sea. Lucas knew that the ocean would always hold risks, but it would also offer rewards for those willing to approach with care and humility.